Greetings everyone, this is David, and today in this video I'm going to be giving you a presentation on papal quotemines and statements from the church fathers, such as referring to Rome as the head of all churches, and how we view those statements and some quotes to demonstrate the uselessness of these quotemines. And these quotes will regularly be statements made by church fathers where Roman Catholic apologists think that certain of these statements prove papal supremacy or Vatican I supremacy, but these statements by the church fathers are actually made about different churches. So, for example, the Church of Antioch is the head of all churches, and you must be in communion with them in order to be saved, right? A statement like that, if it was made for Rome, that will be a Vatican I papal supremacy statement, but in fact, the fathers make those kinds of statements about other churches. So that's what the quotes are going to be about. But before we fully get into those statements, one of the things that I want to start with is why quotemines are generally useless. And it's because they do not, there is no causality. You're not going to be able to form causality from just quotes alone, right? So for example, a statement like Rome is the head of all churches, you still need to justify that using that statement, going from that statement to Rome can appoint bishops at any see anytime they want, right? For example, or that Rome has the sole power, therefore, to state whatever is dogma all alone. And another thing that I want to make note of before I get into this video is going to be about the distinction between primacy and supremacy. Many apologists, in fact, confuse the two, but there's a difference between primacy and supremacy. We, as Orthodox Christians, do not reject papal primacy. We do not reject the idea that the Pope had primacy. This primacy was a result of being first in the diptycha, a primacy of honor, primacy due to exclusive privileges given by councils, or even primacy because of the double apostolic nature of the Roman See, right? So what distinguishes between Antioch, because Antioch is a Petrine See, but Rome is a doubly apostolic see. It was established by Peter and Paul, right? So that's what makes Rome special in that regard. But again, does this primacy therefore mean that Rome is, for example, indefectible, that Rome has the power to declare what is dogma and what isn't? In fact, if you look at the ecumenical councils, if you look at how dogmas were established commonly in history, you are going to see that this is in fact not the case. This is not really how things worked at all. Not the Roman, Vatican I idea. So what we're looking for is the Vatican I idea true? And now we can get into the statements made by church fathers, which, if these statements were made about the Roman Church, many of these Roman Catholic apologists will use these as part of their Florilegia, right? So one of them is going to be about from Saint Basil the Great in his letter 67. This is a letter to Saint Athanasius, where he talks about how he's trying to convince every church to be in communion with Saint Meletius of Antioch, who at the time was out of communion with Rome. And about Antioch, about Saint Meletius of Antioch, he says that he has the authority over the churches of the Lord. He is a man of unimpeachable faith. His manner of life is incomparably excellent. He stands at the head, so to say, of the whole body of the church, and all else are mere disjointed members. So let's imagine that this was a statement made about the Pope of Rome. So then, to see him in authority of the churches of the Lord, so, supremacy over all the churches, right? He's a man of unimpeachable faith. So is that, one can interpret that statement as indefectibility, and that every other church is merely disjointed members compared to Antioch. So in fact, there's some other form of supremacy. That's how the interpretation of this letter will be if St. Basil said this about Rome, but he's saying this about Antioch. Another letter is going to be from St. Clement of Rome's epistle to Apostle James, where he says, Clement to James, the Lord and the Bishop of bishops, who rules Jerusalem, the holy church of the Hebrews, and the churches everywhere excellently rounded by the providence of God. Right? So he states that Apostle James is the ruler of all of the churches in the world. Now, some might criticize this by saying that this is a spurious letter, but I do have other statements that supports what I'm trying to argue here in this video. For example, St. Augustine's homily 2 on the first epistle of John, where he says, if you are Catholic Christians, communicate with that church from which the gospel is spread abroad over the whole earth. Commune with Jerusalem. And then he says, Christ made there the beginning of the preaching of his name, and you shrink back with horror from having communion with that city. No marvel that being cut off, you hate the root. So the argument that he's kind of also making here, St. Augustine, this is an argument that you see even today, we as Orthodox make this argument regularly, is kind of like against schismatics. So we will, for example, tell Protestants that they need to accept apostolic succession, or the old calendarists, we will tell them, well, you're not in communion with any apostolic see, right? I mean, shouldn't that make you think? The same goes for example, sedevacantists, right? So this is generally a good argument against schismatics that do not have any recognition by any apostolic see, and that itself kind of will be a strong argument to question whether they have authority at all. And it's a good starting point for those kinds of discussions. That why are you not in communion with any apostolic see? Not that such an argument by itself is sufficient to prove your point, but rather a good starting point, right? Saint Avitus of Vienne says concerning Jerusalem, your apostolate exercises a primacy granted to it by God, and it is careful to show that it occupies a principal place in the church, not only by its privileges, but by its merits. In the synodical letter from the council at Constantinople, that is the Second Ecumenical Council, you can read this in Theodoret's Ecclesiastical History, Book 5, Chapter 9. It says, of the church at Jerusalem, mother of all the churches, we make known that the Right Reverend and most religious Kirill is bishop. Now, the statement about mother church is interesting here because in Dominus Iusus, at the cardinal at the time, Ratzinger, made the quoted from the Second Vatican Council, which states that the Roman Catholic Church is the Holy Mother Church, relying on the faith of the Apostolic Age. And this is about the Old and the New Testaments, right? But it's used the term Holy Mother Church for itself. In fact, it historically has been used by Roman Catholics. In the letter of Ecumenical Patriarch John X's letter to Pope Innocent, he criticizes Pope Innocent, stating that the Roman Catholic Church is the Mother Church, by replying that really the Mother Church is Jerusalem, because, as St. Augustine says, it is the root. It is where the evangelization of the gospel has started, and for that reason it is the Mother Church. And I want to finalize this video with the Pentecost hymn stating that Jerusalem is the Mother Church. And the reason why I'm kind of focusing on the Mother Church aspect of this is to show to you the differences in primacy, but at the same time, these statements that glorify certain bishops or apostolic sees, if those statements were used for the Roman see, they will think that this therefore proves Vatican I supremacy. Now, again, the point of this video is to show to you that quotemines are useless and that they don't really establish anything. They're just statements, but you need to have something to make the statements work. So for example, history, context, right? You need those things to make them work. Even if you have context for that particular instance, you need general context to understand, well, what does that statement mean, right? It is, again, it's not a justified move to move from, Rome is the head of all churches, to Papal I, Vatican I, supremacy with Roman, papal indefectibility and the ability to make ex cathedra statements all alone and all of these things. That is not a valid move, and that's kind of what I'm trying to show here in this video. And again, especially St. Basil the Great's letter 67 is a very powerful argument showing to you that these statements really are kind of colorful language used to establish good relations with those different sees, and it's part of diplomacy. And that's kind of what I want to end the video with. Before I end this video, I want to give shout outs to everyone who has been my financiers on Patreon. Thank you to Diet Sodalite, Allison, Eddie, Samuel, Father Justin, Node, Maximus, Mitch, Jonathan, Stephen, Vlad, Kerry, Ignatius, Mike, Jack, Nectarius, Flood Basement, Dave, Colton, Seraphim, and Norbert. Thank you all for supporting this channel. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it to those who you might think is beneficial. And I will see all of you in the next video or live stream. Thank you all for watching, and may God be with you all. Goodbye.